Welcome, everybody. My name is Kyle Hoepner, and on behalf of Aspire Design and Home and the curatorial staff at Andrew Joseph PR, I wanted to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for Dining Room Tables, Tips from the Pros. We're pleased to have you here in one of this ongoing selection of weekly, I believe, sessions. And today we are very honored to have three gentlemen here who can help us talk a little bit about how to create the most effective dining room table to go in a home. And especially today, given what's going on in the world and the fact that we're all spending so much time at home, obviously dining has taken on an unusually timely bit of importance to us. Although the sharing and eating of food are obviously a huge thing in all cultures around the world. And so it's not unusual that the dining table should be seen as a real center of our home life. But I just want to introduce a few folks. First, we will be hearing a great deal from Keith Fritz, who is a furniture maker, Keith Fritz Fine Furniture, based in Ferdinand, Indiana. Keith has been designing and building furniture actually since he was a teenager. And his first piece was a Bombay Chippendale style secretary that took about, I think you said 1,200 hours from concept to completion, Keith, was that right?
Yep, 1,241 hours when I was 15, 16. So.
Wow. Keith opened his first professional workshop on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. in 1999. Very quickly began to attract the notice of high-profile designers and their high-profile clients. He's now located in the historic Jasper Cabinet Factory building in Ferdinand, Indiana. Keith and his artisan associates offer a line of what he calls classically modern handcrafted furniture, as well as a great deal of custom work. And I think it's fair to say he's particularly noted for the range and variety of his hand-rubbed finishes. And also in front of the blue piece of art, we have Todd Davis, one of the partners at Brown Davis Architecture and Interiors in Miami Beach. Todd and his partner, Rob Brown, joined up to create their firm in 1994. Their motto is "Comfort is the greatest luxury," and that idea plays out in projects that have roots in traditional classicism, but that are also inflected by the bold tropical modernism of South Florida itself. They have worked with Keith actually on various commissions since 2001, and I suspect we'll hear more about that. And in fact, now offer their own line of Brown Davis bespoke luxury furniture produced by Keith's workshop. And finally, we have Eric Haydel, interior designer and co-owner of the McGeough showroom at the Boston Design Center. Eric hails from South Louisiana, but his life in design so far has been anchored in the Boston area. He was named to the ASID's Ones to Watch list in 2017, and last year served as a style spotter for the High Point Market Authority. He's also owner of two quite different showrooms in the Boston Design Center, and one of them is the reason he joins us here today. McGeough is one of the first showrooms in the US to carry Keith Fritz's work, thanks to early contacts with founders Jim and Susan McGeough, who are partners with Eric at this point. And the showroom continues to represent Keith quite ably across the New England region and has been responsible for getting these tables into quite a large number of really beautiful homes. So thank you all. And as I said, special thanks to Andrew Joseph PR for curating and Aspire Design and Home for hosting us today. So Keith, if you would like to lead us into the discussion, that would be great. And I will just mention one quick thing. For all of you who are attending, I'm sure many of the designers will have questions for Keith. So if you can use the little Q&A button that's located down at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom window, I will be watching that during the session, and we'll try to work in your questions as we can during the discussion. So Keith,
and I love lots of questions. So if you have any ideas or any questions, type them up and Kyle will read them. Questions are essential. So the goal of this is to help you create the perfect dining table for your clients. I feel like the dining table is the most important piece of furniture in the home because there's something sacred, there's something special about when you gather your family and friends around a table, you share a meal, you share stories. So that's why a dining table's got to be totally custom tailored. Rarely can you just buy a stock table. So the goal of this class is to help you create the perfect dining table for your clients. And just a quick overview of the class. You start with the size of the room, the shape of the room, and the number of people you want to seat. That's where you start. Then, do you need leaves or not? And what type of leaves? And then the next thing is what type of wood and finish. And so those, and then like what type of design of the base do you need? So that's just kind of like the overview of the class. So designers come to me all the time with their dining table problems or questions, or, we have to seat so many people in a room, and what type of table is going to do this? And you start with the size of the room, the shape of the room, the number of people you want to seat, and you have to do a seating chart. That's where everything starts. Factoring the perimeter circumference of a shape is kind of the starting point. So there we go. Can everybody see this? So for example, like a 60 round, I'm going to grab my calculator here on my phone. So how many people seats at a 60 round? 6, but here's the math. 60 times 3.14, it's 188.4 inches of perimeter circumference divided by 6 people. That's 31.4 inches per person. So figuring out your perimeter circumference is essential. Now, Todd, I don't know if you remember a few years back, one of your clients insisted that they buy a round table that would seat, was it 12 or 14? And I said, you can't really do that. Do you remember that conversation a few years ago?
Yes. Yeah.
Oftentimes clients go to the designer and they ask for the impossible. And so we did a seating chart and showed you like a round table, like you can do an 84 round and you can seat 8 and maybe you can squeeze 12, but you're really never going to get more than 10, 12 people at a round table because the table's too large. You can't reach the middle. I think a round table is perfection because everybody's equal. And if you want to seat 6, 60 round, if you want to seat 8, 72 round. But when you go above 8 people, sometimes you can get to 10 on an 84, but they get too big. So, and they only work in a square room. So, a lot of people who want to seat 10 or 12, their rooms are elongated, they're rectangular, and you're going to need a dining table that's a rectangle or a racetrack or an oval. Do we have any, are there any questions, Kyle, on?
Not yet. No, actually, I do have a question, which may not be a designer question, but you mentioned a racetrack and an oval.
Yes.
What is the difference between those two things?
Sometimes people will go into the showroom and they'll say, I want a racetrack oval. And I'm like, do you want a racetrack or do you want an oval? Because an oval's a mathematical formula. It's an ellipse. A racetrack is half round ends and straight sides. And so let me explain, so at the bottom here, you see these racetracks. You want, if your X, Y axes are a 1-to-2 ratio, like 48 by 96, that's a 1-to-2 ratio, you need a racetrack. If you have X to Y axes that are close to 1-to-1, like a 2-to-3 ratio, you want an ellipse, an oval. A 2-to-3 ratio oval is beautiful. So a 60 by 90. That would be a 2-to-3 ratio oval. And that works. You can't do a 48 by 96 oval because the ends are too football pointy to set at. Now, some people have done an oval where they know they can't set on the ends. But, you know, when you want to do 48 by 96, you generally do a racetrack and not an oval. Does that answer the question, or does that make sense?
Yeah, well, actually, Todd, this brings up a designer question I think that you might be able to speak to. Is Keith was just mentioning the interaction between the size and shape of the table and the room. And so from the designer's perspective, when you and your partner are working on a space, you know, I know obviously the client has a preference or may express a preference for what size and shape, but how does this kind of go into your architectural thinking?
Well, so when we're designing a space, we always start with a floor plan. And, you know, in terms of a dining table, clients oftentimes express their wishes of they want a circular table, they want a rectangular table. They always tell you how many people they want to seat. So where we start is with the floor plan of the room. Oftentimes we like to get creative and do a dining room with a banquette instead of just a table in the center of the room. The banquette is, you know, is then the size of that is dictated by the size of the table. You know, again, how many people you want to seat and the size of the room. We generally, you know, work with Keith on our dining tables to make sure that the particular style of the table that we're either, like Keith has a variety of table styles that he has stock. We've also, as part of our furniture line with Keith, custom designed tables that then go into the furniture line. And so those tables in particular, we work very closely with Keith to make sure that the dimensions of this table work with the style of the base that we're designing. We also make sure with Keith that, you know, what chairs we're using or what banquette we're using are designs that so that people don't bump their knees into the center, you know, pedestal of the table, or the side, you know, legs of the table don't get in the way. We also make sure that the arms of any chairs with arms, you know, will slide easily under the table. So, you know, there's a lot of designing that goes into a dining table that works successfully. I would say in most really good design, there's a lot of thought and detail that goes into it to make it seem just very easy and seamless. So those are all the, you know, technical details we work out with Keith. Typically, we'll do some preliminary drawings of the table if we're designing it, but then we always get shop drawings for approval from Keith to make sure that everybody's in sync with, you know, all of the technical aspects of the dimensions and exactly what the table's going to be like. And, you know, it's not all just to basically, you know, make it sound like it's just all numbers and details. Once, you know, you get to a certain point in the process with Keith, I don't know if people know this, but Keith actually, like, you pick the kind of wood that you want, you pick the beautiful graining or the finish that you get. I mean, Keith actually personally book matches each grain of the wood so that it becomes an artistic piece also. That's just, you know, all of the thought and details that go into it. When you see his work, it's just, you know, beautifully put together, beautiful quality. I mean, I just don't really, you know of any other manufacturers. That's why we've always worked with Keith on dining tables and other furniture that put that level of quality into the construction and the materials.
Yeah, well, Todd, actually, let me see if I can share this image, because there's one particular table that you guys, I believe, did together that's now part of your line. And it looks like I cannot do that, so I apologize. But if you, readers, if you go on to
Should we pull up the Carolyn? Is that the one you were wanting to?
The one that's basically octagonal.
Oh,
I can't
more
remember.
the divine.
Oh yes, the divine. Yeah, and maybe we can pull it up on our end.
That's a really interesting one. Rob worked a lot with you, Keith, on that one. And that one actually has a lot of angles. It's an angular table with, I don't know how many different angles it has, but that took a lot of work to detail out to make sure that when people sat at it, it actually was very comfortable and you didn't feel weird sitting at a different angle from the person next to you.
Yeah, it worked. That worked very well. Yeah, comfort's the most important thing. The dining table should be comfortable, and all of your guests should be comfortable, and that's why they have to be custom tailored to fit the space, to fit the chairs, you know, and then, you know, the wood and the finish is all totally custom tailored too. Yeah, there we go. There's the divine dining table.
So if you can't really see it in this image, but if you were to look at a bird's eye view of that table, I don't know, do you remember how many different angles the top has?
Yeah, it's, you know, it brings people kind of inward, you know, the way the ends angle, you know, so.
And the sides are all angled also. But the fun thing about it is you sit at it and, you know, it's not awkward, but in terms of, you know, this is another thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of Keith's dining tables. You know, they actually are art in their own right. And that was, when we were designing this table, it was a house that has a great deal of art, and we wanted a unique piece. And, you know, dining tables, think back to your grandparents' generations, have always been these status symbols that get passed from generation to generation. And, you know, Keith's pieces are, you know, those kind of pieces that will get passed from generation to generation because the quality is there.
So I'm gonna bring us back into the structure of the class, because the beginnings, the size of the room, shape of the room, number of people you want to seat. Then the next thing is, do you need leaves or not? And then what base design, and then what wood and finish. So I'm going to kind of corral us back. The next thing is leaves. Do you need leaves or not? And if you have a small room and a small space, there's only one size that fits in that space, and you don't need leaves. You need leaves when you need to get larger or, you know, expand, when you have a bigger room. There's a lot of different leaves that we do. A lot of tables are rectangular or racetrack, and they take center leaves. You know, they open up in the middle, the leaves go into the middle. We do a self-storing butterfly fold center leaf. We do perimeter leaves, which is a round table where the leaves go around. So you could have a 66 round that turns into a 92 round. So there's round to round or perimeter leaf. And then, yeah, we're showing here on the screen a butterfly fold end leaf in a blue venture table. And Todd Davis, Rob and Todd, encouraged me to do the colored woods. And it's such an innovative idea. People think wood should be brown, but no, this is so, again, this is another, shows you that the table is art. But anyways, I'm showing you the leaf. We'll talk about finishes later. So the ends of the table open up like a drawer, and then the leaf butterfly folds out. So that's a really great option. We made this for a client in Palm Beach, an older couple, and they didn't want to have to lift the leaves. You know, this is a one-hand operation. The other types of leaves, we do squared around, which is where it's a square and then they fold up into a round. We've done squared around ganging. We also do refractory self-storing leaves, which is where they slide under. And I'm trying to think of some of the other leaf configurations. Maybe I've forgotten one, but anyways, you know, do you need a leaf or not? I had a designer last week from Chicago that was talking to me. They have a tight condo space and their client wanted a leaf, and I just told them it doesn't really work. Like leaves and really small tables don't work. Like they wanted like a 38 square table, and it's like, it's too small to get a leaf in it. There's only one size that works. But leaves are great, you know, when you have a bigger room. Like sometimes the dining room will be open to the foyer and you want to expand into the other rooms. So anyways, leaves give you a lot of flexibility and versatility, but they add to the cost of the table too. And some people don't like leaves because they don't want a seam. And, you know, a lot of leaves have a seam. Those end leaves on the Blue Venture, that's nice because there's no seam in the tabletop, but you do have a seam in the table edge and you have a thicker tabletop to hold the mechanisms. So, and we draw all of that out, you know, so that people can see that. Gosh, what, any questions or anything about leaves?
No questions from the attendees yet, although we do encourage people to type a few in if you have questions, which I'm sure many of you are designers, and designers are notorious for having questions about everything. Eric, just a quick question for you, either through your design practice or at the showroom. I mean, are there sort of aspects of the commissioning process that Keith has touched on that have been part of your experience, or have there been any particular challenges that you all have faced in kind of connecting a designer and client with the furniture maker and getting everybody happy?
Sure. I think there are two things that really come to mind. First is picking back off of Keith's idea about leaves, and you mentioned the mechanism. I think it's important that from either design perspective or the manufacturing perspective is that the leaves will generate an apron around the circumference of the table to hide that mechanism. And so unfortunately, we do come into play where a designer will say, I need leaves, but I don't want to see the mechanism. And it really leaves us hanging to say, I'm sorry, we're not going to make you happy in that respect. We do work really closely with Keith's team to either bevel the edge, maybe tuck the skirt in a little tighter, and as he mentioned, adjusting the thickness of the top to maybe conceal it a little bit more, almost as if it's a floating ghost appeal. But at the end of the day, that is just something that exists. There is the mechanics. We also look at the base will determine how and which we can put leaves in. If it's a singular base and pulling it out to an extended amount over inches, it makes the table unsteady. And the last thing we want to do is create something that is unsafe for that.
Right. I mean,
Sure. No, and I think going back, one other thing that's important in our conversation, when clients come in and they say, I need to sit 12, our follow-up question or sort of option B is always, how often will you seat that amount? Because that helps us determine what's the right fit in piece, whether it is a racetrack or a rectangle or an oval or even a round. So how often that number also plays into the planning of the process, both from design and from showroom perspective.
So sometimes people want a table that's going to double in size. Like people will be like, well, we want a 60 round that's then going to be 140 long. And if you're going to double the size of a table or more than double the size of the table, you have to split the base. And the base has got to move in addition to the top moving. And we do those types of tables where the base splits. But like our Nantucket table, you know, a 48 by 96, you can put 2 leaves in the middle and the base can stay stationary. A number of years ago, a designer ordered a table in our Chicago showroom, and we showed a Victory with 3 legs, no leaf. They loved it, but they wanted a leaf. And when you do a round table that takes a leaf, you can't have 3 legs. It has to have 4 legs. And then you've got this apron. And the client wasn't happy with the table. They said it didn't look as pretty as the one in the showroom. And I'm like, well, you wanted a table with a leaf, and you got to have 4 legs, not 3, and you got to have an apron. And the drawing you signed off on it showed all of this, and I agree with you. the round table with 3 legs looks better than what you got, but you had to have a leaf, you know, and we tried, you know, so that's why we do a sign-off drawing on every order, and the designer had signed off on the drawing, but the designer didn't show the drawing to the client. And sometimes designers will sign off on drawings, but oftentimes designers will let the client sign off on it. We had a couple of questions. Can you?
Yeah, yeah. So we do have 2 questions at this point. One is from Leslie Fine, who asks if you would consider providing a leaf storage box with your tables.
There have been some clients who have bought like a pedestal that the leaves then go in. We can build those. A lot of times people will go online and buy bags and just put the leaves in a bag and store them in a closet. So it just depends. You know, we've done those in the past. There can be a lot of work in building one of those. So it's, you know, it's just whatever the client wants. Yeah.
And we actually have a really great question from Tova Hermanson, which I think takes us into a new aspect of the topic in a way. We had a request to make a table that could seat 14, but that didn't feel too big and empty when it was just the immediate family. Any advice?
Well, how big is the immediate family? And if the immediate family is 6 people and you're wanting to go from 6 to 14, you're more than doubling the size of the table. And then you're going to need to split the base. Or if you have a big oval or a racetrack or a round, people can get closer together or farther apart. When you have a rectangle, you have corners, and they kind of define where people sit. Here's a problem. You know, clients build these huge dining rooms that'll hold 14 people. And then they're like, well, let's have this table get small so we can be intimate. And then they got this little tiny table in this huge room. And I'm like, your little tiny table looks itty bitty in your huge room. If your room is big enough to seat 14 people, you need a big table in the room. Otherwise, the room's going to look empty. So it's been several times like clients will order intimate sized tables, but their house is not intimate sized. So it a lot depends on the room and the house.
Yeah, and that brings up, I think, implications maybe that Todd will want to talk with a little bit, because if the table is going to vary drastically in size, as a designer, Todd, presumably you also need to really think about how that table is being lit, which needs to work, you know, at the small size and when it's greatly enlarged, and also other furniture in the room that presumably needs to either be movable or change in scale as the table does. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, again, it comes down to floor planning. It comes down to sometimes educating a client that, you know, many of these houses, say, have a formal dining room, but they also have, you know, huge family room kitchen areas. So, you know, oftentimes what we'll do is, you know, make sure that there is a dining area in these big family rooms that is what they really want to use on a regular basis. So they don't, if they have a huge dining room with a huge table and, you know, it's just 4 people in the family, they, you know, they don't necessarily have to use that. But, you know, we do get creative with, you know, using banquettes, because banquettes with a dining table pushed up to it and then chairs on one side, that actually helps create a dining room that 1 or 2 people can just go in. Like one person could go in the morning, like a Sunday morning, and put the paper out on the table with coffee and just sit in a banquette and really enjoy that huge dining room just by themselves. So there's ways that, you know, you can make a room multifunctional if you design it correctly, so that, you know, if you have just
becoming a schoolroom for children. So that's also something that we are looking at and more immediate, and who knows how long sort of component in that conversation. But I know when we discuss materiality, I mentioned to you, and I want to be very clear, this is a total praise for Keith and his team, is in the selection process when we're working with designers, we remind them that so many of the finishes are what I would call a living finish. It has the opportunity to be functioning in multiple ways without the fear of damage or ruin to the piece of art or piece of furniture. And I think Keith does that so successfully. We see so many furniture lines who you get what you get, and if there's a scratch in it or if it needs to function, it's too bad. And we don't have that case here with this company and this line. We have the ability to make that transition pretty seamlessly. And my favorite is definitely his hand planing. And we have a new beautiful hand planed Davis on our floor that really speaks to that flexibility of casual to formal to function even as a schoolroom in the middle of the day.
Yeah, in the class, we'll have to talk about table bases because that's something that we skipped over. But let's talk about finishes, because I believe that an object should be permanent, that everything we make, nothing should ever be disposable. And we've serviced, like, all of the people who do deliveries, like I do deliveries, Tom, Brad, all three of us, we deliver all of our own furniture. And I'm loading, Brad just left to go to Florida to do deliveries. I'm loading Tom up, and he's going to head to the East Coast. And he's going to go and do touch-up and repair work on tables that we made. One of them we made like 12 years ago. So anything that you do to damage your table, we can generally fix it in the house, and it's not that big of a deal.
That's kind of a challenge for people, I think.
Can I just say one thing? That's one of the things my clients love. They love that Keith or someone from his company years later will come and do touch-ups and repairs to these pieces that are timeless.
There was a piece that we did for one of your clients in DC back in 1999. And a couple of years ago, they contacted and said, help, the drawer won't open. And I went to their house and I got the drawer open. They had too much stuff crammed in the drawer. But it was so fun to go back and see that house like 20 years later. So yeah, you buy furniture from us, we'll come take care of it forever. But what Eric was saying, this is a sandblasted driftwood finish, and it's got texture. It's not going to show wear. This is an engraved pattern that we did on a dining table. It's also driftwood. And Eric was mentioning the hand-planed finishes. So I like for there to be texture because...
Keith, can you take that hand-planed finish and just sort of move it around?
This was a little shiny, and the hand planing's not very deep. I didn't get the best
But
one.
you can see it when you move it around.
You can see it. It's got a gentle undulation. It's just the way all the antiques were hand planed. It's not a perfect reflection. I grew up with antiques, and I like those nuances, you know, the gentle undulation from the hand planing, how it reflects light. And sometimes people want black furniture, and I don't like black because it shows everything. But this is a sandblasted kind of lower sheen black. I like that because it's more forgiving. When Bunny Williams orders dining tables, this is generally what she does. She likes these lighter colored walnuts that are faded, a little more mellow. They don't show wear as much because of the lighter color. There's multiple colorways. So I just grabbed, what was that?
But it almost looks like pecan wood or something.
It's walnut, but yeah, it looks like a pecan. And then I've been coming up with some totally new finishes. I don't know, there you go. This one I love. It's white gold primavera. This is a log I just had dyed in Germany and imported. This is a lace wood, a charcoal lace wood. Wow. And then this is a curly maple, but it's dyed in a gray. So the log slide, it's done the way textiles are done. This is how we do the blue furniture. The trees are sliced into veneers, and then they're immersed in a vat of bleach to get rid of the wood color, and then it's immersed in dye. So it's taking wood veneers and doing them just the way fabrics, just the way all these fibers are done, so that you get this real depth and glow. Do you see how that moves? You know, so anyways, those are some new finishes. You know, like that is not going to show wear. You've got multiple colorways, you don't show wear. As much lighter colors, you don't. This
Keith,
is a nice,
Keith, would you step back and show us the lace wood for just a moment?
Sure.
I have a comment about that.
Thanks for...
Because that is such a special, and we don't even know about it yet in the showroom. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so this is lace wood, which has those quarter flakes or medullary rays like a quarter sawn oak wood. And it's just been dyed this nice kind of charcoal color. I had it dyed, and it was dyed in Germany, and we just imported it. And we got it like right before the lockdown. We had to like go to Indianapolis and we had to talk our way to get it out of customs. And it was kind of a real pain, but I'm thrilled with it. So I've been making samples of this and getting them out to the showrooms. And we just printed a new flyer on our self-storing leaf tables. So we've been kind of getting these out to people. So anyway, so there's some finishes, but the tabletop should be art, like the finish, the grain, all of it. I view the tabletop as a work of art, and a lot of clients just want walnut. Okay, that's fine, but a lot of clients, they want something that's art. I don't have any pictures on me, but we've got a beautiful walnut stump right now. Jim McGeough loves the art of fine gunsmithing, and a lot of your fine guns, the stocks are stump walnut, and the stump is where, you know, the grain gets curly and the roots go into the ground, and it's got such beautiful grain because of the curl and then the minerals that it brings up out of the soil. So anyways, it's fun. A lot of clients, they'll pick a finished sample for color, but then I'll go select from my collection of rare veneers, send them pictures. Sometimes we'll make finished samples on the actual log that we're using for them.
Keith,
we have a question.
A question for you, actually, from Richard. For clients that want a shinier, darker finish, what suggestions do you have for daily use to avoid signs of use such as scratching and rings?
Make sure you don't have any children or pets, and hire a maid. Like if you want a black shiny table, like my life, I can't live with a black shiny table, and I don't have any children or pets. I just, like, black shiny shows everything. Like if you want black shiny, do black palm, do Coromandel ebony, do Zircody, do chocolate rosewood. I don't have any of those with me, but those are all woods. They're naturally black, and they've got multiple colorways, black and chocolate. If you just do like piano black, it shows everything. It is a nightmare. And, you know, it's just going to require a lot of maintenance and service. And like, why would you do that to yourself? But some people, they want that. So
one of the things we would recommend to sort of at least minimize is adding texture. And so you're going to get a variation of a finish. You'll get a little bit of shine, you get a little bit of dull. But I think that's the only way to truly mitigate that concern with the client is we need to vary it so that way it looks natural. It looks more organic in its nature. Yeah, just like that finish. That's from
this is not a shiny.
Would share that.
Well, Todd, in South Florida, for you guys, the question of gloss must come up frequently, I would think.
Well, you know, we have every style here, and one of the things that I really, modern is big in Miami, and one of the things I love about Keith's finishes is they're not what he was describing as being really difficult. You know, those high gloss, you know, I don't know, you see it everywhere. It's kind of like, to me, it's almost overly processed and there's no personality in it. I just love that Keith, you know, hand matches his grains, and then I love the choice of finishes, and I love that a lot of them, you know, sort of have a more porous nature to them, which marries really well, I think, with modern shapes, in that it's not what you would expect, but it's the craftsmanship and the beauty is really there. So yeah, we don't get a lot of high requests for high gloss here.
I like wood grain. I want to show the wood grain. I don't want it to look like plastic. And like a lot of people, they have wood in their cars and it's shiny. And that's a polyester finish. And you can do that on small car trim because it can be done in a factory setting. It can be baked on. It's epoxy, but you can't really do that on a big custom dining table. And the other thing is if those car polyester finishes, they crack. You've seen an older car where they crack, and when they crack, you can't fix them. And there's other furniture companies that use those thick, shiny polyester finishes, and it gets damaged in shipping. You can't fix it. So when clients are like, we want shiny, high polish, look like plastic, I'm like, you don't want that. Or if you really want that, that's not what we do, you know.
But that's the point about Keith's finishes, is what he does is not what I don't really know many other companies that do your finishes. So if people want the stuff that, in my opinion, is just more mass produced, there's a million places to get that.
Lacquer will do that. I would encourage actually people to go to Keith's website and just look at the amazing range of colors and grains and finishes there, because it's quite impressive. I think, Keith, we're starting to get a little bit short on time here. So I think there's one more big topic that you wanted to talk about, and that's table bases.
The design of the table base. So when you're designing a table base, you got to keep in mind your lap is 18 inches. So somebody wanted a 38 square table to seat 4. Everybody's knees are going to be hitting, you know. So if you have a central pedestal table, it needs to be 54 round or bigger, because 18 times 3 is 54. So, you know, certain designs, like if you want to seat 4 at a 38 square, you got to have legs on the corners, you know. So anyways, comfort's the most important thing, and being able to set and stretch out your legs. A lot of my designs have legs that curve in, and they curve in because you can retract your foot, you cannot retract your knee. So if you sit down and you slide sideways, the leg's going to curve in to accommodate your knee. And I think it's comfortable to have a leg in between your feet, but not in between your knees. So a lot of my designs, they curve in so that they're more comfortable to set at. I like to stretch my legs out. I don't like to have a central pedestal. Some people do. So anyways, that's the last little bit, the design of the base. And every table we do is custom tailored, so we can change the legs to fit where people are going to sit. So anything else? Any questions before we end?
Well, I do wonder, kind of just a style question particularly for the two designers, but everybody. I mean, I do wonder if in recent years there hasn't been a bit of a move toward tables that have some kind of centralized pedestal, one or more, depending on the size and shape of the table, just because it gives a cleaner silhouette when you surround it with chairs. So the table is not actually adding a lot of extra legs to that little thicket that's underneath. Do Todd or Eric, either of you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think most of the tables we've designed with you, Keith, do have more of a pedestal type of base. For just that reason. It really is much more functional, and you know, it gives more flexibility. So, you know, again, the dining table, like when you invite people to your dining room, it should be for several hours the center of the universe. You know, it should be about comfort, about amazing food, about great lighting, great company. So everything you do when you design that table, you want it to encourage just comfort without people even thinking about it. And if you think about, you know, sometimes when you sit at a table and there's posts and so forth, it's just one thing to kind of distract you, and just having no negative distractions, you know, while people are dining is the goal.
I also think that we are seeing the pedestal base in a more casual setting, which may historically sort of been the opposite, right? You may have seen the pedestal base in a more formal setting. So in breakfast areas, in shared kitchen, dining spaces, you're seeing that pedestal. And usually, because from the client's perspective, it takes less space. Whether we can argue that in floor plan or not, it's the visual space in which it takes up. So in city living, it takes up more visual space that you want to look out, be able to see your harbor view or the $1 million view that you've paid for. And then you see the more formal, when it does have a formal living setting, lots of times the clients want to see the beauty of a base, so they're looking for more base parts because leans itself to be more artistic. So from a style setting, we're seeing as we move part of our generations into city living, they want these single bases to see view. And as some are moving and building formal homes that have formal living rooms, they want a more exaggerated experience with the design style.
Yeah. Well, I just want to sort of in closing, I just want to thank you guys for discussing this, because obviously from a designer's point of view, a dining table is a place where clients and their family and friends are inevitably going to spend a great deal of time. You know, they may be in the bedroom a lot, but they're asleep. Whether or not they use the chef's kitchen is questionable, but they will definitely be at the table at some point. And as Todd said, we hope they'll be there for long periods of time, having a wonderful time with friends and family. So I wanted to thank you all for taking part in this discussion. I wanted to thank our participants for the many interesting questions and for being part of this. Also, in closing, again, I want to thank Aspire Design and Home for hosting this series of discussions, and Andrew Joseph of Andrew Joseph PR for curating it. Before we leave, I do want to mention that this time next week, 1 p.m. next Thursday, there will be another discussion very much like this, called Finding Inspiration During a Pandemic, with Ellen Tanksley, Denise Guadalupe Rojas, Lori Weitzner, and Cami Reese. And Andrew Joseph will be facilitating that. I hope you've all enjoyed this and found it useful. I wish you all a wonderful rest of your Thursday, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.